I know that you love to use real world examples. They proliferate the book and the content, and when we're always speaking. And I think examples are a really good way of bringing out what you're talking about, and it reframes it in people's minds, and it's not just using expert language now; it's painting a picture. And I wonder if you could sort of elaborate on this. What role do real world examples play in helping the entrepreneurial skills? And maybe you could share one that you plan to discuss in one of the upcoming sessions.
Yeah. The first time I understood the power of stories to influence people was back a long time ago, and I was working in a sales organization, and my sales manager would sometimes, we'd be just sitting and talking or having a beer or whatever, and he'd tell a story about another salesperson who had a problem and how they solved it and how he helped them and that sort of thing. And usually on the way home that evening, I'd realize he was talking about me. But it was a really great way for him to address potentially uncomfortable conversations in a way that was comfortable.
Yeah.
And so years later, as a coach, I would talk to a team. Like, well, they would be facing some sort of challenge, and and I'd pull out a story. Some of my stories are true. Some of them are based on truth, and some of them are completely made up, but they're all convincing. And I'd tell the team a story about somebody else who faced something similar and what they did. So instead of me instructing the team, go and do this to solve your problem, I just tell them a story about how somebody else did it. And then it was amazing how they decided then to adopt some of those things that those other people had done because they were just as good as them, if not better. And it was just so much more effective than being prescriptive. I just tell a little story. And sometimes it wasn't even in the moment. It was the next day, or it was, with a different subject or something like that. But it was so effective. And so it became, I started writing down the various stories. Anytime I had some sort of situation, I wrote them down, and it allowed me then to adjust them a little bit for the situation. But it is such an effective way.
Well, stories have been such an effective communication method throughout human history.
For thousands of years, right? Yeah, go to France and look at the caves, look at the walls of the cave, and we'll see how we told stories even before we had words for them. So one of the stories you asked for example, one of the stories I use often is about 10 or 15 years ago, I was going to, one of my side hustles is teaching continuing education classes for insurance agents. They have to keep up their license and have to take so many hours every 2 years. And, I realized that in the northern part of my state, there were very few providers doing in-person classes anymore. And I could tell by the license numbers of the people that lived up there that they were not young people. They were people that had been for a long time. And I knew that they didn't like the online classes. They told me that. So I had all these facts that I believed about my customer. And so I started scheduling classes up there, and I was booking rooms and hotels, and even started printing up the manuals because I'd sent out an email and I had 150 people that said, yep, I'll be there. But what I didn't do is I didn't ask for money yet. So after I had $2,500 of expenses sunk, I sent out an email and said, okay, it's time to pay. And 2 people out of 150 paid. So I had $2,500 in expenses and $150 in revenue, and then had to figure out how to cover the mortgage that month.
You'll learn from that, won't you? You've learned from that. We all learn from these things.
Yes, and so I learned to say, well, the say-do gap isn't because people lie or they're bad people. It's just the difference between yes and yes, I'll pay, and here's my money are different things, and you have to isolate them. If you send out a survey to your customer and 1,000 people say, I'm ready to buy tomorrow, that's okay. But then you need to send the same people a payment page that allows them to put $20 down towards their purchase. And then you see how many people are willing to pay.
Well, that's always something that you focus on as well, is that it's not necessarily what people say, it's what people do. It's customer behavior, and
you test behaviors, and what people say is not a behavior. Yeah. It's a platitude, it's a courtesy. And that doesn't pay the bills. In fact, similar story. The one of the cable TV companies here in town was bringing fiber optics to various neighborhoods, and they offered everybody in town the opportunity for their neighborhood to win the right to be towards the top of the list to get the fiber optic installed. All you had to do is send in $20, and whichever neighborhood sent in the most $20 checks, they'd get to the top of the list, and then the $20 would be put towards your first month's bill. So there's very little skin in the game, but there was still something, and there's the penny gap as a concept out there. Is like the difference between 0 and a penny is amazing if you test it.
Yeah, I mean, my sort of my expert area, idea validation, is all about that. It's all about behavior, and often it doesn't match what people say. If you ask people, is this a great idea? They often say yes. But if you ask them, yeah, it's great. Yeah, I love that. But if you ask them to pre-purchase it,
may I have your credit card number?
Exactly.
Oh, exactly. Well, but the cool thing is, in that moment, you find out why.
Yeah.
Okay, so they won't pay why. And I had a team that went 18 months building a product before they asked to pay. And those whole 18 months, every month I said, so are we going to ask them to pay this month? No, we're not ready yet. Well, actually, you were ready the first month. All you had to do is describe the service you were going to offer, and if it was valuable to them, they would have put down $100 to be on the beta list. But they didn't do that, and then 18 months later, they found out that their customer wasn't even willing to spend $20 a month towards something that was costing a couple of $100s to produce.
That's such a valuable lesson to be